Okay, so I might have something, or it might be nothing. But have you ever been sitting in your house and everything is technically normal, but something feels off? The air feels heavy. You feel like you're being watched. There's something just slightly wrong. And you can't explain it, but your body already has. Okay? Here's where it gets weird. All right. Listen to how people describe hauntings. They say things like, I felt watched, the air got thick, I just knew something was there. And now listen to people describe things like anxiety or PTSD or a panic episode. They say things like, I felt watched, the air felt heavy, something just wasn't right. And the question is not whether ghosts are real. The question we're asking is, why do these things sometimes feel exactly the same? Because whether the source is supernatural, psychological, environmental, or something we just don't have a name for yet, the experience still has to pass through the same system: your body, your nervous system, your brain. And your brain is not just recording reality, it is building your experience of reality. Cool, right? So, most neuroscience treats consciousness as something that is deeply tied to brain activity. But the bigger philosophical question has never fully gone away, and that is the brain creating consciousness, filtering it, shaping it, limiting it, or translating something more complicated than we understand? And this is where I want to bring in Mr. William James. And I know that sounds like we are suddenly taking a hard left into old dead philosopher land, but stay with me because he actually belongs here and probably will belong in a lot of things I talk about, okay? So we'll do a side quest right now on Mr. William James, who is one of the founders of American psychology. His massive book, The Principles of Psychology, came out in 1890, and that helped shape how people talk about consciousness, attention, emotion, habit, memory, and the self. Okay. And one of the things he is most famous for is the idea of consciousness as a stream. Okay. And tiny historical footnote, because I know someone will fact check me and say James did not technically coin the phrase stream of consciousness. Alexander Bain used it earlier in The Senses of Intellect, but James is the one who made the idea famous, okay? And the idea is basically this: your mind is not a filing cabinet. It is not one thought, then another thought, then another thought, all lined up neatly. It's a stream, right? It's sensation, memory, emotion, fear, prediction, imagination, and meaning all moving together. Which matters here because when you walk into a dark hallway and something feels off, your brain is not just saying, like, door, wall, floor, shadow. It's also asking, have I felt this before? Is this safe? Should I be paying more attention? And sometimes your body answers before your mind does, okay? This is also why James's idea, pragmatism, fits this episode so well. Pragmatism does not only ask, is this belief objectively true? It asks, what does this belief do? Right? How does it change the person who has it? Does it harm them? Does it help them? Does it trap them? Does it give language to something they couldn't explain? So when someone says, I felt watched, or the air felt heavy, or I just knew something was there, we can argue forever about whether it was a ghost, or anxiety, or trauma, or grief, or sleep deprivation, or some other thing that we don't have a name for yet. But pragmatically, that experience happened. The nervous system reacted. Something became real in the body, even if we do not know what category to put it in. And that does not mean every strange feeling is supernatural, but it also does not mean every strange feeling is meaningless. James lived in a time when psychology was becoming science. Electricity was changing cities. Photography was capturing moments in a way that must have felt like supernatural. Okay, and telegraphs and telephones were making messages and voices travel without bodies. And at the same time, people were obsessed with seances, mediums, apparitions, telepathy, haunted houses, and cyclical research. So James was standing right at this strange doorway between science and the unexplained. And instead of dismissing weird experiences just because they were weird, he studied them in the varieties of religious experience. He looked at mystical states, visions, conversions, and altered consciousness as a real human experience worth taking seriously. Not because every claim was automatically true, but because the experience itself mattered. It did something to people. And that is the lens that I want here. Okay. Maybe the better first question is not, maybe it was real. Maybe it is, what did I do? What did it do? What did the body know before the mind had words? And why do humans keep having experiences that feel like they are coming from somewhere just outside ordinary reality? That is why James belongs in this episode. He gives us a bridge. One side, psychology. On the other side, the unexplained. And in the middle, that's human experience, turning sensation into meaning. Either way, one thing is clear. You're not experiencing reality directly. You're experiencing your brain's interpretation of it. Okay? And what is your brain? I think we talked about this before. Your brain is a pattern machine. Okay. And it has one primary job, and that's finding patterns, assigning meaning, detecting threats. Not because your brain is broken, because your brain is trying to keep you alive, right? Your brain is not sitting there calmly waiting for complete evidence before it reacts. It is constantly scanning, comparing, predicting, filling in gaps. A sound in the dark is not just a sound, right? It becomes a question. Was that the house settling? Was that my cat? Was that a person? Was that something else? And your brain does not always wait for the answer. Sometimes your body answers first. This is where paranormal belief gets a little more interesting than just saying people are irrational. Another psychologist, Neil Dagnall, and other researchers who study paranormal belief look at these experiences through perception, interpretation, belief, and cognitive style. In other words, it is just about what people believe in. It is also about how the brain handles ambiguous information. Research describes something called illusory pattern perception. That means seeing meaningful patterns in noise, connecting dots that may not actually be connectable. A shadow becomes a figure, a creak becomes a footstep, a cold room becomes a presence, a weird feeling becomes a warning. And honestly, this is not some rare glitch. That is survival. Evolution does not reward being perfectly accurate, it rewards staying alive. If you think something is in the dark and you are wrong, maybe you feel a little silly for a second. But if you actually are in the dark and there's something wrong and you ignore it, that's a much bigger problem. So your brain is biased to overdetect, overconnect, overexplain. It would rather give you a false alarm than miss a real threat. And that is where this gets tricky, because sometimes your body may be right that something is wrong, but your mind may be wrong about what it is. There is a famous case from the early 1900s, often called the Mrs. H case. It was later published in 1921 in the American Journal of Ophthalmology by Dr. William H. Wilmer. And it reads almost exactly like a haunted house story. Okay, so a family moves into a house. They start feeling dread. They hear footsteps. They see apparitions. They feel watched. They feel weak, sick, afraid, and mentally unsettled. They think something is in this house with them. And in a way, something is, but it's not a ghost. It's carbon monoxide. An invisible, odorless gas was leaking into the home. And this is the part I cannot stop thinking about. What they experienced was real. The fear was real. The dread was real. The visions were real to them. Their bodies were sounding an alarm because something was wrong. But the story their minds reached for was not accurate. The experience was internal. The trigger was environmental. The haunting was not in the walls, it was in the air. And that distinction matters, because this does not mean hauntings are fake. And it also does not mean every strange feeling is supernatural. It means there is a space between the feeling and the explanation, a space where your nervous system reacts before your conscious mind understands, a space where your brain takes incomplete information and tries to turn it into a story. And sometimes that story is, I am anxious. Sometimes it is, I am unsafe. Sometimes it is, this house is haunted. But underneath all of those stories, the first thing your body may be saying is simply, pay attention. Pay attention. If your brain can create an experience that feels that real, how often is it doing that to you? How often does your body know something before your mind knows what to call it? And how often do we mistake the alarm for the answer? But here is what I do not want. I don't want to oversimplify this, because not everything fits neatly into the carbon monoxide box. Not every strange experience has a clean explanation. Take Doris Bither case, also known as entity case, in the 1970s. Doris Bither's claims were investigated by people connected to UCLA's former parapsychology lab, cool, including Barry Taff and Carrie Gaynor. The reports included multiple witnesses, alleged poltergeist activity, strange lights, cold spots, and environmental disturbances. Now, this was not a perfectly controlled scientific experiment. It is not definitive proof of the supernatural. There are skeptics who have criticized the evidence, especially the photographs, and pointed to issues like poor controls, interpretation problems, and maybe even photographic errors. But it is also not as simple as saying one person imagined everything, and that is the uncomfortable place we keep ending up. Some things can be explained. Some things can probably be explained, but we do not have enough information. And some things sit in that weird middle space where the evidence is messy, the experience is powerful, and the conclusion is not clean. That does not mean we abandon skepticism. It means skepticism has to be honest enough to say, I don't know. And when we cannot explain something, a new layer kicks in. That layer is belief. Because we do not just experience the unknown, we build stories around it. It's not just about what we see in the dark, it is about what we want to believe about the mind itself. Are we just bodies? Are we souls? Are we receivers? Are we pattern machines? Are we sometimes picking up something real? Or are we sometimes making meaning so quickly that we mistake the meaning for evidence? That is why stories like, and I don't mean any shade, okay? I love this podcast, but that is why stories like the telepathy tapes become so compelling. They present emotionally powerful claims about communication, consciousness, and human connection, and I understand why people are drawn to that because it feels hopeful, it feels meaningful, it feels like evidence that the mind is bigger than the body. But when scientists and skeptics look at those claims, especially around facilitated communication and telepathy, they raise serious concerns about controls, confirmation bias, cueing, and whether the evidence actually supports the conclusion. And still, people believe. Not always because they are gullible, sometimes because the story gives them a place to put something they already feel. Because an idea, if it gives language to an experience, it becomes hard to let go of that idea. So look at the whole system working together. Your brain filters reality and fills in the gaps. Your body reacts to uncertainty and signals danger. Your memories add context, context, and your emotions add urgency. Your beliefs add meaning, and your mind decides what it all means. Sometimes that meaning is I'm anxious. Sometimes it is I am grieving. I am unsafe. Sometimes it is something is here. And sometimes we don't really know. But even when we do not know, the system is still working. The brain is still building, reacting, interpreting, and the story is still forming. Every experience you have ever had has passed through the exact same system. Your brain, your body, your nervous system, your memory, your beliefs, your fear. That's your meaning making machine. It is powerful, it is protective, and it is pattern hungry. And it is not always accurate. So when something feels real enough, your brain will build a reason for it. And once it has that reason, it's really hard to let go. So maybe the question is not only what is real, maybe the question is why did it feel real? What did it do? What did my body know before my mind had words? And what happens when the explanation we reach for says less about the thing in the room and more about the way humans turn sensation into meaning? So, what do you think? Do we have something? Or is it nothing that just feels like something? Bye.